right, everyone, we've got Andrew Nicholson and Jonelle Richards over here, and we're going to be interviewing them in the interview lounge right here on the couch. First, you guys, how was your trip over? There's a long way to come to get here to Kentucky for some of our foreign riders.
We had a good flight over. It is actually quite a long week for us here. We're not used to obviously being at the event so early in the piece. We arrived on Saturday. The park was quite empty, but it's been a good few days and the sun's been out, so it's been nice.
And Andrew, you're two traveling well as well?
Yeah, both my horses, Kimbo and Calico Joe, travelled over really well. And yeah, like Jonelle says, it's quite a long time for us to be here ahead of an event, but it's a beautiful place to be, and facilities are great, and we're enjoying it.
You've been to Kentucky a few times and very well in the past, and what makes this unique as opposed to some other 4-stars in your mind?
The main attraction this year is the classics.
Right.
Yeah, when with a chance for the big money, you've got to come along to participate to try and win it. And the other is for me, it's one of the best 4-stars. You know, the cross-country course it's a proper 4-star. They're big, technical. The footing is superb. You know, nice, gentle, undulating hills. Good grass. Perfect arenas for the dressage and jumping, and great hospitality.
And for you, Jonelle, has Rolex, kind of the atmosphere here, lived up to the hype or what people told you it would be?
Absolutely. You know, I didn't have any huge expectations of what I thought it would be like. I just knew it would be pretty impressive, and it certainly is that. The park is beautiful. As Andrew said, the hospitality, you know, they really go out of their way to look after the riders and the sponsors and the owners, which is nice to see.
Both of you represented New Zealand in the last Olympic Games and had great success there with a bronze medal for your country. And just some highlights for people maybe of that experience. Andrew, you've been to 6 Olympic Games. For you, Jonelle, was your first time there being on that team. And what kind of stood out to you or through the process, some of the highlights?
I guess for me, it was obviously my first Olympics, so it's nice to sort of get that one under your belt, so to speak, and to have been such a, you know, part of such a positive and experienced team. You know, I was lucky having Andrew and Mark, Jock and Caroline obviously had done a few championships as well, so I was certainly the newcomer, but having those guys around you made it very easy. And it was nice that we had a successful time. I think we all thought and hoped we could have gone a little bit better. But if a bronze is the worst we could have done on that day, then, you know, the future's looking all right.
Certainly looking very bright. And Andrew, what about you?
Yeah, it's always a great honour to ride at Olympic Games. Yeah, they're very different to any other major competition we'll compete at. You're all pulled together very much as a team, and yeah, it's nice to be able to mix in the Olympic villages with proper athletes, you know, not just horseback riding ones. You know, the whole thing about it is there's a real buzz, and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
And then just being here on the 2 mounts that you have, obviously you choose from a larger pool of horses, and how do you kind of select, or do you have a favorite to place in different events with the HSBC Classic Series going on? You're the leader in that right now, and so how do you kind of make those selections or decisions?
Well, first I have to chat with the owners and see which fits in with them. I've got my 2 best horses are at Badminton. I ideally would have liked to have had one of them here,
right.
But yeah, it sort of fitted in with owners to stick them at Badminton, and then we've got Lemueland in sort of 6 weeks' time, so I have 2 other horses going there, and so I just sort of spoke to the owners of the 4 horses and worked which ones were happy to travel to here and which ones that suited their schedules to go to Lemueland, and that's pretty much how we end up working it all out.
Well, these 2 horses that you've got here doing terrific thus far. You'll ride the second Quimbo later today, but you're sitting in first place overall so far after Calico Joe put in a very lovely test yesterday. Did he live up to your expectations and what he's capable of in your mind?
Yeah, he's been very consistent at the dressage phase pretty much all his career. I think last year out he finished 6th or something like that in the dressage. And he tries very, very hard in the arena. He's very easy to ride in the arena. You can sort of squeeze as much out of him as he's got. He's quite happy to let you do that, which makes it very easy. His tricky bit is normally the show jumping, so we go day at a time with him.
And the one that you'll go on later today, Kimbo, what can we expect to see out of him, hopefully?
Kimbo's a very, very easy horse to ride. He's been very consistent all his career, and it's his first 4-star, but I have a lot of faith in him, and I feel he should go in there and be pretty much like Joe. Let me squeeze and pressure him as much as I can, and he'll hopefully give me all he's got.
And Jonelle, 17th at your first 4-star event, and maybe some things people don't know about your horse and some unique things about that horse that you'll be riding here this weekend.
That's a hard question.
Can be in the barns or anything just that makes him special.
I've had him a couple of years now. He is a big horse. He's a bit bigger than I'd ideally like. When I went to looking for a horse at that particular time, my one main thing was that I didn't want a big horse. So I sort of got that one wrong. But he's a very kind and genuine horse. He's a really scopy galloping type, which is why we thought Kentucky would suit him. It is his first 4-star, but he's a great galloper, and he likes to use his scope. So we're hoping that he'll like the track tomorrow.
All right, and the track tomorrow here, Derek's changed quite a few things. Andrew, you were here last year, but some of the complexes or the things that you see maybe giving riders trouble or things they need to focus on. Holly Bennett was on the couch earlier today, and she said that Andrew Nicholson is the magician of cross country. So just some things, kind of special areas that have stood out to you after walking.
Well, I thought after my first walk around that Derek's pretty much put his stamp on, Kentucky. It's last year I thought he was perhaps using a little bit of what was here before and mix and matching. This year I think it's very much his own style, and I like it a lot. I think he's a very horse-friendly course designer. He builds the fences very big. You've got to be very positive at the beginning. He wants you riding very positively, I feel, which is, I think, great. Horses get a lot more confident when you're positive. And then the way he's put in a lot of technical type fences, so you have to pretty much sit on your backside and ride in between a couple of big bold fences. You then, the party's over, you got to sit down and ride the brush through the hollow to the brush afterwards. Well, I think it's fence 6, or I'm not very good on the names of them. But you've galloped over the first bunch, and then suddenly you've got to take hold of the situation a bit more. And I think he's pretty much done that all the way around the course. A few big fences to open you up, and then you get to the sunken road where you've got to work pretty hard and get the right speed and the right distance and pop your way through, and then it goes like that pretty much all the way around. So I'm looking forward to it.
Do you think at the sunken road, and there are options obviously throughout the course that Derek's given people, but do you think we'll see a lot of people take the direct route in most of the complexes?
I feel at the start of most people's rounds they'll be going direct. I think Derek's very clever with his alternatives. At your first look, you think it looks quite easy, the alternative, and then when you look at it, you realise when you jump element A, it's a difficult turn to get to it, and then on landing, it's a difficult turn after it. So the jumps are straightforward, but the turning, and when the horses start getting tired, you then make a simple jump very, very difficult. So for me, I'm much happier just going the direct ways. Right,
the terrain certainly playing a big part. And Jonelle, the coffin here caused a lot of trouble last year. It's a different coffin this year, but riders have to make a choice at that coffin complex. For those of you who've seen it, you come in over the rails and then the ditch, and then you'll either have to go to the left or right and make a decision there about that corner. Is there a side that appeals to you more that you're planning to take? I think the left-hand side will be the more popular option, and certainly looking at sort of where people are walking the tracks, it looks at way at present. But
you always start with a plan, and sometimes those plans change.
Right.
So I think people will favour the left-hand side, but who knows, if we see one or two have a problem, they might start opting for the right.
Are you guys people who will be kind of heading over to that area where you can see the TVs and see how certain complexes are riding? Do you watch kind of horses that might be similar to the ones you're on, or what's your take on looking at that, or sticking to your original plan based on what's happening?
I wouldn't think Andrew does too much watching. I think he knows pretty well what he's up to. But certainly I'm late drawn. I'm sort of 3/4 of the way through the field, so it is helpful to watch the earlier ones go. I think it's important not to watch too much. Sometimes I think you can let it affect your own plan. But I'll certainly have a look out there and watch the good riders as well, make good jobs of it. We don't want to see the bad ones.
Andrew, not very frequently do we see a complex like Derek's put out there early on in the course where you jump the brush on the left-hand side and then there's a ditch that's probably going to play a large factor in that complex, but it's not flagged. So for those of you who've seen that combination, there is it's a larger brush with a skinny cutout, and you come straight down and then back up the terrain there to another skinny cutout, but there's a ditch that horses will probably be looking at in the middle. Have you really seen that, and what do you think he's doing there?
This is the fence size, meaning how he wants you to sit on your backside and work a bit. The fences before it are all very big but very inviting, and get you moving on up. I think we need to move up to the brush because we know what's behind it, but the horse doesn't. So for me, ideally, I'd want to come perhaps with a little bit more power than is necessary, because the horses are going to get in the air and then see the ditch to the side, which is a possibility will make it harder than if the ditch was there to be jumped. And I think he's been very, very clever in what he's done. It's very fair. It's a good question and makes you ride a proper line. Yeah.
Do you still get nervous after all the years you've been doing these big courses?
I'm always nervous.
That's good.
It's what makes you alert.
Makes everyone else feel better that they get nervous too.
I'm not a big fan on watching other riders. I don't really like walking the course with other riders. I like to ride my horses my way. I find when you watch a lot of other riders, you'd end up trying to ride your horse like their horse, or you walk a course, before long you're jumping the fences on their horse, not your horse, if that makes sense. I like my two horses are totally different, but hopefully if I can have a good round on the first one, I quite often stick to the same plan with my second one, even though they're totally different types of horses. They're used to me riding them, and at national competitions I would ride them all the same anyway, so why change?
Right, and earlier we were chatting on the couch with Holly Bennett and Allie Knowles, and Allie's first 4-star, so maybe some advice for her to listen to Andrew there and not look too much what's going on in the barns or out on course, stay in the barns before she goes. But just another thing that we chatted with them about was, when did you know that this was going to be the career path that you chose? There's a lot of people here who are young riders. They're making a decision. Do they want to be a professional equestrian? What do they want to do with their careers? And was there a defining moment when you said, this is what I want to do, and particularly with eventing, to choose to be an eventer?
For me, it was pretty simple, really. I grew up with horses. I was making money from selling my own ponies and things like that when I was quite young, and then straight after the World Championships here in Lexington, when Bruce won, I went to the village hall to see a film evening of the World Championships. It was probably sort of 2 months after it, and I seen Bruce, Jimmy Wofford, Mike Plum, and I just went home and said I'm going to be an event rider, because I thought it looked very easy.
So simple, Andrew.
Yeah, and how naive I was, but
It'll be easy.
that's how they made it look, watching it. And it caused a lot of trouble, didn't it, the World Championships that year, but those ones seemed to blitz around it. I thought that's a simple job.
What about you, Jonelle? Did you look at Andrew being a fellow countryman early on in his career and think, well, it looks so easy, I'll do it too?
I can't say I ever recall watching and thinking that, but no, it was more a natural progression, I guess, for me. I knew I was a competitive person, whether it be eventing or other sports. I liked the thrill of it, the discipline, the determination required, and certainly, watched the Olympics and the World Championships on TV, and one day aspired to do it myself. So here we are.
Well, it's gone pretty well so far, I think it's safe to say. And just these horses, we see you guys so often at these huge events, and they're in the spotlight all the time. But when you're home and a typical kind of day in the life of both of you, what would that be like? How many horses do you exercise or ride? And then for those same horses, kind of what is their schedule like when they're not showing, as far as how many times a week would they be jumping? When would they be flatting? Just, a basic week for them. And if you are ever home long enough to have one of those.
Well, exactly as you say, it does vary, sort of pre-season, during the season and post-season really, because during the season we are away competing. Both Andrew and myself run fairly big teams, so, we're out with novices. We could be out 3 days a week, so it does vary, and you sort of work it around when you're there and when you're not. I think when they get a little bit older, it almost gets a bit easier because, the work is all in place. And it's more sort of like maintaining it, as opposed to, the young horses coming through that need all the education and the outings. But certainly, they would be doing fitness probably every 4 days. They tend to run every 2 or 3 weeks. The build-up for a big competition like this is probably 3 or 4 competitions. But, it very much depends on the horse and his experience and his temperament.
And Andrew, for you?
Yeah, it's easy for people come to these lovely events and see us, and that's our lifestyle. But
hanging out on the couch.
Exactly, it's a good lifestyle, isn't it? It's but December, January, February is where, for me, all the hard work is. It's the same routine day after day. It's cold, it's wet, but you've got to get them fit, and it's the hours you put in those days what makes these days. You can't skimp on it. It's a pretty strict schedule I have with the horses. One day is dressage, one day they might be galloped, another day is jumping, and so January, February, I may jump 18 horses in one day because they all get jumped, because you put the jumps out and the jumps get taken back in the next day, and it's dressage with the hours of daylight. You can't hang about. It's the same on a canter day. I try and have maybe 10 horses gallop one day and 10 another day, so we can break up the dressage day a little bit. And they might do dressage one day, the next day they go for a hack in the woods with the grooms. That's their easy day for the week. And then once we start competing, the horses have an easier time. They would have more days off when we're competing than what they do in those December, January, February days. That's the hard work is those months to me, but you just do it and it's part of it.
And after an event like this, then how long typically, obviously it depends what your plans are for later in the season, but how long will these horses who are here at Rolex get a little break when they get home? Or
mine they'd have 2 weeks they would still be worked, but it'd be just very gentle exercise. One is because they'll come back from here and they're quite hyped up. So they've been in a work schedule for the last 5 months, and to suddenly say to them, now you have 2 weeks off, doesn't seem to work well. So I find it's best just to hack them a bit, So they feel like they've been worked and they'd spend most of the day in the field.
As a favor to your grooms, so they don't have their hands as full, maybe?
Exactly, and then they'll come back in and be built up for Burley, whatever that's coming up, and they get 2 months proper break at the end of the autumn season.
And do you do the same type of thing there?
Yeah, in essence. They'll have a couple of weeks of downtime, and then it's preparation through to the next one. We tend to always do a spring and an autumn 3-day, and then like Andrew says, after the autumn 3-day they'll have a couple of months of proper R&R in the fields before it gets too cold.
Well, we know Andrew knew he was going to be a rider from the very beginning. It was clear. But for you, if you weren't, a world-class equestrian, what else would you do with your life, or what profession would you choose, do you think?
I actually really liked school, funnily enough. I know a lot of horse people. Yeah.
I'm so glad you said that, because yesterday we had Boyd Martin here in the afternoon, and I asked a question from the audience was for Boyd, and the question was, if you were a young rider, what advice do you have for young riders? And it was asked by a mother, so obviously she was not excited when he said that his advice would be to not go to any schooling and to just get riding right away, because going to college ruins riders. So here's another piece of proof for the moms, because I had to then backstep a little bit and tell her that it's okay. Lynn Szymanski and Aaron Sylvester, they went to college. They're still here. So here's another proponent for schooling.
I did enjoy school. I went to university, but only for a year. But again, I did enjoy that. But it sort of came down to time at the end of the day, and I didn't have the time to pursue that as well as this. So that's when I made the decision to ride full time.
Is there a specific job?
I was studying law.
Okay, so we have a lawyer on the couch. That'll be good. And then Andrew, if you didn't ride, is there something that interests you, or in your spare time, which is probably not much of?
I'm interested in all sorts of sports. I follow horse racing in a big way and get quite involved with the jump racing in England. So I couldn't see I'd do anything without the horses. If I hadn't have gone into eventing or show jumping, I think I would have gone into racing. I was always too heavy to be a jockey, but I could always work for racing trainers and school jumpers or whatever. And I could see my life would always be something to do with horses. Right. Definitely not the school bit.
Not the school bit. Nobody's held Boyd. So we'll take some questions from the audience. I'm sure you guys have some questions for them, and then we'll let you guys run off because you have plenty to do other than hang out on the couch probably all day. But are there any questions for Andrew and Jonelle? Yeah.
When you're looking for your next kind of upper level horse, is there basically a guideline that you look for? Is there a certain type of horse or different?
For me, the question was, what sort of horses do I look for the big level? Most of my horses I buy as 3-year-olds, unbroken. I'm lucky enough to have a good working business relationship with a breeder who I take all of the ones he breeds. And you know quite quickly which ones are good enough for the bigger stuff and which ones aren't. And you try and find a home for the ones that aren't, because every day you ride it is wasting your time. It's wasted, it's expensive. They're better to do a job they can do well rather than me battle on in the job I know they're not going to do. And you make mistakes. You can have ones you think are great, and you go to your first competition and they can't cope with the atmosphere. But the majority I find now, it's quite a safe bet to work with the ones I feel are good in the beginning. And if you have them young enough, you can train most of it to work for them. The main thing I like is a horse with a nice mind. I like to feel that when I go into the dressage, the cross-country start box, or the show jumping, that they give you their mind. You work their body for them. I like those sort of horses which let you get as much out of them as they can, and they seem to enjoy you asking them to do more and more and more, and the other ones I like.
You like the hard workers as well, as instead of maybe looking for some other things first off, or are there other elements that you look for, like in a gallop or?
Well, I think, the sport has evolved over the last few years, and obviously the horses have as well, and we're seeing, a bigger variety, I guess, of horses at top level now than we ever did before. So I think it's quite an individual thing, and you take each horse. I think it's a bit easy to get tied up in the blood and everything. A good horse is a good horse in its own right because of its qualities. I think largely they need to be athletic and, light on their feet. And, have the brain obviously is paramount. And if you've got a bit of movement and a natural jump in there, then that's all a bonus. But, an athlete, I think, is important.
From the lower level events that a horse starts out at in their career, especially over here in the United States, the lower level events, there's not a lot of hype, not a lot of excitement at those. And then how do you is there anything you guys do to prepare a horse or help them when they're coming, for example, to Rolex for the first time? It's a big stadium and a big atmosphere. Anything that you've felt helps them with that, or just seeing that personality from the beginning?
I think that's when in the UK we're very lucky that it is, it's a big sport in the UK, as well as France and Ireland, Germany. So a horse that is produced from an early age, like all of ours are, they are almost coming through a system, I think, which quietly but progressively introduces them to those sort of environments. So I think, by the time they do get up to the top levels, they generally have been exposed to what they need to be. Having come from New Zealand years ago, I would have said that was certainly something we didn't have obviously over there, and it was quite an eye-opener for them, suddenly to turn up at badminton and they just haven't seen the crowds and it is very different. So that is something I think that we have over there, and it works well.
Andrew, you've been based in England for 30-some years now, so is that one of the biggest reasons why you've stayed there so long?
Yeah, so the main reason in the beginning was the travel. To go from New Zealand to the other side of the world is expensive with horses. And the other is, like Jonelle said, there's an awful lot of competitions. There's always quite a lot of hype at them, even the small ones. So our horses learn at a young age to cope with it. And even, say, coming here with a horse with its first time in a 4-star, I would, going down the ramp into the stadium, I perhaps would hold its head a little bit more positively, shall we say, just like it would have had at its first competition, just to reassure it that you're doing something it can do and not give it the option to look around. Rather than go down the ramp and loosen off the rein a little bit and sort of say to it, it's all a bit scary, what do you think? I want to go down the ramp and say, this is normal. And then next time, if all goes well, you can just be a little softer on them. But every ride is different.
Other questions? Yes.
Well, I see most of them loose jump, and you sort of know the pedigree of them, and you can see how light they are on their feet very, very easily for me. And then the moment they're broken in, the first few times you ride them, you can feel which ones are athletic, which ones are a little bit like they've got concrete in their feet. You make mistakes, but on the whole, it's quite a good bet. It probably doesn't work if you're having pure show jumpers or pure dressage, but for me, a top event horse doesn't have to be spectacular. It's got to be trainable. So you use its natural ability, and if it can let you train it, the rest will work.
Do either of you have a horse that kind of went against the grain a little and maybe you didn't think it was going to be a top one and it surprised you?
I've had a few top ones, which one I gave away in New Zealand when I was 4 years old. I used to go back to New Zealand for 2 months a year. So I used to buy young horses and then break them in and go back 9 months later, and it never grew. It was very small. And he had a club foot. One foot was much smaller than the other. So he was very sound, a very nice, willing little horse, but very small. And I thought with the expense of the airfare to fly to England and being small, I was better to give it away. So I gave it to someone. It ended up being called a horse Broadcast News, which lent up in England with Mark Todd riding it. It went to the Olympics in Atlanta with Vicky Latta. Yeah, but it's still good for everything, isn't it? A kiddie rode it for 6 years, I think, a Pony Club kid who took it on. I think she rode it for 6 years, and then Vicky Latta brought it. So yeah, you got to make the positive bits out of your mistakes,
right.
don't you? But people think we only sell the bad ones, you see.
See, you can get one with a club foot and it might turn up for you.
And I think he kept competing until he was 16 or something with me.
Big heart.
Completely sound. Story gets worse.
Other questions?
Have you always been drawn to horses that always challenge you, or horses that you kind of seem to have like a natural?
The question is, have you always been drawn to the horses that kind of challenge you, or the ones that have the natural ability?
I've learned it's much easier to have the ones with the natural ability. It took me a while, but I've learned that one.
I'd be exactly the same as Andrew. I used to always take the difficult ones thinking, turn it around, it's going to be a great one, but not anymore.
Others? Anybody else? Okay, well, we'll let you guys go. Thank you so much for stopping by the Interview Lounge, and we wish you the best of luck on your second ride today, and we look forward to seeing you both go cross country here in Kentucky.
Thanks very much.